So, welcome to the Pipeline to Profitability podcast, the podcast for home service professionals. And today, I think it's number 3, maybe 4. I welcome Jim Klauck from Checker Pro Podcasts. And we got a lot to talk about today. So we'll start off letting you tell our listeners a little bit about what you do, Jim.
Well, sure. And I can't wait to get into what you do, because we're going to do a little expose on you on your own podcast today. They call me the Radio Pitchman. I've been doing radio for a long time. And what I do now is I take my radio experience and I help home service professionals gain exposure online through video casting, where we take a video and we put it on podcast platforms. And I specialize in home service professionals doing that.
Love it. I have to say, what you're doing, I wouldn't say it is different, because not that many contractors are doing it. No, I was very grateful for you to invite me along 2 weeks back now to an event you hosted at your local country club, golf club, where I got to spend time with the one and only Michael E. Gerber, which was an absolute pleasure. And I also got to meet some of the companies that you're working with, and from the garage door space and from the HVAC and the plumbing. Very impressive, and I'm proud to know you, and I'm really honored to be part of your podcast. And thanks again for joining me, Jim.
Thank you. I enjoy having you in the Checker Pro family. It is kind of like a family. When we had lunch with Michael E. Gerber a few weeks ago, it was nice. Michael was at the head of the table. I was at the other head. And I'm like, this is a nice family, because I have clients, members, and friends and associates. And, I thought it was a great event too. It was great to have you all there.
And noticed how I hogged the seat right next to Michael. That's the advantage of arriving early, right? Early is on time, and on time is late. I think I got the second best house in the seat in the house.
Absolutely. So now I want to ask you questions on your podcast, Pipeline to Profitability. May I ask you some questions?
Absolutely.
Because what you do is fundamentally important for the trades, because you train and coach, you help, you have all this experience going back decades, and you bring it to America as well as internationally. Australia is where you're from. Can you talk a little bit, before I get into the question, could you talk a little bit about your background, where you came from, because you have this accent that doesn't sound like you're from the continent that we're on right now. Tell us a little bit about who you are, where you came from, and then I want to get into some questions that are really going to help the viewer today.
Sure. So, yes, I am from Australia, Sydney, which is a 5.5 million population. So Sydney is quite big. When you look at all the other cities in Australia, it's, I think we've got a total population of 27 million versus 330 million, the US, and I am based in Houston, Texas, as are you. So my background, I got into plumbing, back in the 80s, and I didn't really get into, and that was like working in construction builders, and I didn't really get into the service industry, home service industry, until into the 2000s. And when I did, I then started to, I realized that the industry didn't have the coaching, and it didn't have the best practice groups in Australia. So that's when I used this thing called the internet back then. It was quite early. And I started to communicate with best practice groups. I think Frank Blau was one of the first people I reached out to, the founder of Nexstar, James Leichter, Mr. HVAC, Aptura, reached out to him. And I realized that the world is such a big place when you can communicate from Australia, a tiny little island which has got the same land mass of the United States, so far away, and I use the internet to communicate and start to learn. And that's basically my humble beginnings. And then I realized that Australia needed flat rate pricing, it needed best practice, it needed trainers. And that's probably the shortened version of how I got stuck into the service industry, not only as a contractor, but as a coach. And we grew our company to be, it was one of the largest in Australia. It was plumbing, electrical, heating, cooling. And, we got that to a pretty big company, 100 staff, while we were actually running a best practice organization partnered with Service Roundtable, Service Nation.
Yeah. Great self-intro. Thank you very much for that background. A lot of people do know who you are, well respected in the home service space. When I mention your name, they're like, I know that guy. He's from down under. Yeah, that's the guy. So it's actually nice to be different, especially in North America, coming from Australia, because you do stand out. Do you find that helps you?
Look, yes and no, because the thing is, I don't think there's anything wrong with the way I talk. I find that you Americans talk quite oddly, strange, however you want to say it, but we'll put that to one side. That could be a later communication subject. But you guys have been dealing with the likes of Paul Hogan and
Hogan.
the Hugh Jackmans and the Nicole Kidmans and the Keith. So you've been dealing with us Australians for quite a few years now, and I believe that I've spent a lot of time in the US, and for the last few years I've been living here. But our cultures and values are nearly identical, except you guys talk funny. That's about it.
Well, sure. We took the British English long time ago and twisted it somehow. So, we speak American, right? I mean, let's be fair. It has some English roots. And it's American, and there's no question there's a huge difference. Okay, so I have some questions for you. A lot of people want to know what's going on out there in home service. Where is the industry heading in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, look, that's a good question, and that's one that I've been asking now. Probably in the last year, I've seen a change, which is more than I've seen in the last 20 years as far as the use of technology, best practice groups, coaching. And I think that, COVID and what it actually did for the industry and it did for the world has changed things. And there's some parts about it I do like, and I love the fact that we can be anywhere in the world and we can jump on a Zoom call and we can chat. We can, we can interact with anyone. I love that side of it. But where I'm seeing the industry change is via just the way we run our companies, using technology and using the right technology to drive it forward. I mean, we both follow, and I'm going to touch on some of the gurus out there and some of the best practice groups. Some are actually growing a lot faster than others, but we both have a common friend, being Tommy Mello. And I'm watching what Tommy's doing to the industry. He's in the home services industry via Garage Doors. He's also got his fingers in some other businesses, ventures as well. And I'm watching what's happening with coaching, communication, and look, I feel that the companies that get on board, and it's not just about the changing technology, the scary world we're venturing into. It's also about how we're using that technology and the likes of Cirrus Software, which I've got to know Billy Stevens quite well, and just the way that software is actually changing the way we run our businesses. So I believe, and there was I think it was probably a few weeks ago, Billy Stevens put a post up about the amount of change that's coming in the next few years, and I think that's really going to be accelerated faster than anyone knows, just by the use of technology and how we use it in our businesses. So, but those that get on board, not just with the way we coach, but the way we run our businesses with that technology, are going to have a clear advantage. There's a lot more to it than that, and I'll probably explain a little bit better as we go. But yeah, there's a lot of change coming. I'd be interested how you see this, Jim.
Well, I was going to ask you, what do you think is going to happen to the home service organizations that don't fully adopt the technology? We hear AI all the time, and we hear people say, if you're not using AI today, you're already behind. There are a lot of home service companies that have a long heritage. In other words, 3 generations deep. Some of them are a little more advanced than grandpa was, but still they're kind of living back in the 1980s, maybe 1990s. Even if they lived in 2010, it's totally different. What's going to happen to a lot of them? Are they going to go out of business, or are they going to get absorbed before they're worthless? What's going to happen?
There's 2 things, Jim. They're either going to adapt or they're going to die. Okay. And I'm guessing a lot of them, if, I'm of that older generation, I was born in the 60s. We both were. Yeah. I realized a long time ago that we need to change. And sometimes we wait too long to change. I have to say that when it comes to using the internet, Google ads and all that, I was way ahead of most of my friends over here in the US. I think my first website was around 2000, 2001. We were doing Google AdWords not long after, and I still noticed, and the only reason I went in that direction was because I just couldn't justify the cost of the yellow pages, and I stopped yellow pages over 20 years ago. AI is a big part of this, and my belief is that AI is not going to replace plumbers, electricians, HVAC technicians, but AI, if used right, what I believe is those that use AI will replace those that don't, if that makes sense. So, for example, you've got, and AI has been and I can say this, had a really good podcast with Billy Stevens last week, and he uses AI within his software better than anyone I've ever seen. And I might, if we've got time, I might touch on that. But yeah, so if you've got a team member that knows how to use AI and they're using it well, they're going to replace those that are not.
Well, actually, why don't you touch upon what you were going to mention about Billy Stevens, how he's using AI so well in the software? What is that secret sauce?
Okay, all I can tell you what I know. Now, let's just think about your average service call, whether it's plumbing, electrical, garage door, heating, cooling. Billy worked out when he first developed the software that there's, let's say, 28 touch points. The customer calls in, someone rings to confirm the call, the technician communicates. And so he believes that on average there's 28 touch points on your average service call. Some are less, some are more. I know jobs where there would have been hundreds of touch points on the bigger jobs. So if there's 28 touch points and you've got software that can reduce that to 2 to 3 touch points, that's eliminating staff, physical staff in the business via technology. Now, this is the indicator that that will shock a lot of people listening. Is your average company has, let's say, one office staff for every $1 million in revenue. Now, if you're $1 million in revenue and you've got 4 office staff, you're overstaffed. Okay, so if you're a $4 million company, you should have 4 staff. Okay, and that's and maybe that's not an exact way to work this out, but with Billy's company, see, when Billy developed software, Sierra software, he started BillyGo, and he used it to test the software. He runs, most companies are usually between 800,000 to $1 million per office staff. He runs closer to 4 million per team member. So a business I think he's on track to do 20 million this year, and I think he's got 4 staff in the office. Tell me any business that's doing 20 million that's only got 4 staff. It's hard to find a better example, and his business is probably the most profitable service company in the industry, in my view. I could be wrong.
Well,
it might be someone more profitable.
Sure, and I know he has very profitable businesses. We've talked about it on my podcast, Contractor Stories, when he and I were on there. And so it makes sense. Labor is generally the number one cost, the biggest cost in any organization. And if you can leverage AI and you can have systems that don't have a beating heart, meaning a human, do this 24/7 without getting sick, without breaking down on the way to work, without complaining, without going through a divorce, without being on drugs, without going to jail, seriously, then it's a dependable, less expensive operation to run. And in many cases, I believe the homeowner, the customer, is getting better service to an extent than a human who is having a bad day and they're on the phone saying, yeah, how can I help you? Because they just had a bad day already, right? And the homeowner doesn't need to hear that. So there's no question, if you can cut back on that human, which we don't want to really say that, but in reality, if you can put your human resources toward the technician side and some other, driving the business forward side, and have some of these mundane tasks done by AI, you're better off.
Absolutely. The other thing too is one thing I've learned from getting to know Billy Stevens is he removes resistance in working with his company. So he has 1 hour appointment times and 0 dispatch fee, which goes against the industry norm, but it's fucking working. I admire him for what he's doing. He's built a software product using AI that does replace office staff that would add, you still need to have a certain number of technicians. So he's removed that path of resistance in dealing with people, and the way the software works is just like using Uber. I mean, how convenient is it to just jump on an app, book a ride, and then off you go. So that's part of the change that's coming. The other area, and I wanted to not spend too much time on this, but it's bigger in the US than it is in Australia. It's actually next to non-existent, is private equity is buying up well-run service companies, big time. So in the US, probably 60% of the companies that I know that I've been working with for years have already been bought up. Primarily HVAC, heating and cooling businesses, but they're chasing plumbing businesses, and the businesses that I work with that really focus on improving drain revenue will increase their resale price and the value of their business. So, and this is going to lead into where I see the coaching and education space change, but Australia is behind. Okay, maybe we were ahead in certain areas like technology when it comes to cleaning drains because we've sort of modeled Europe. Maybe we were a little bit ahead with using Google websites, that sort of stuff. But the US is ahead in the majority: technology, software, private equity, and the amounts that these companies are paying for well-run companies. Holy shit! It's absolutely mind-boggling to me.
Some of these multiples, I'm like, come on, is that for real?
Yes.
And then you see the big boat and the Lamborghini, and they're like, I think so.
Yeah.
Right? We see it all the time. And I've never seen anything like it before. Over the past 3 years, maybe 5 years, it just seems like, hey, if you have a nice little profitable HVAC business or plumbing business, a good home service business, you might want to consider getting some private equity involved. And they're like, well, I don't know if I can get much money for this. You never know. You might want to ask.
The downside to that, and there's always, whenever there's great upside, as there is with private equity, there's downsides. A lot of vultures out there, Jim. And I'm not here to name and shame, but there's vultures out there preying on companies that are not running that well and basically taking over these companies and paying pennies compared to what these businesses are worth. But I see the doors are opening for new best practice groups that are going to not prey on these companies like vultures, but help these companies to grow in a partnership that's going to help them see the full potential of their business. So there is a change coming, and whether anyone that's listening to this podcast that's part of a best practice group, trust me when I say this, it is changing. It's changing from the done with you model and best practice. What I've learned is every best practice, from good to bad, is there to help the contractor. Some help more than others. So I've got absolutely nothing bad to say about anyone in the industry that's helping contractors to succeed, but there is some people out there doing the wrong things. So so it's shifting from here's the information, this is what you need to do. And a lot of the bigger best practice groups, which I have mentioned, are doing a done with you model. But what if not every contractor has got the ability to implement? What if we were to give you a done for you model, where we actually put someone in your business to shape the tree? What if that was the revolution that's coming? And I'm part of that now. It is happening, and I'll be getting involved with an amazing organization that's going to bring that best practice to Australia. And that's the change. Because if I was to look at the companies that I've worked with over the years, some really good companies that have grabbed the ball, I've said, right, you need to do this. And 5 minutes later, they've fucking done it. And they've implemented and they've got the results. But not everyone is wired that way. It comes back to leadership. How strong is the leader? Has he got the right people actually doing the implementation? So there's a lot of things that come to play. But if you were to provide a best practice that was to put someone physically in that business, that's the game changer for the industry.
Hasn't that always kind of been there? Isn't that like a turnaround guy? Is that what you're talking about? Someone coming?
No, it probably has that. I've never actually had that offered to me, and I've been part of some of the the greatest best practice groups out there, where they actually put in a general manager into the business, or an MD, a managing director, to actually direct traffic on daily process and accountability. But it probably has been out there, but it's now, I believe it's going to become the norm, because I don't want to see, and anyone I see out there that is struggling to grow their business, they've got the same information. I give, I've worked with hundreds of companies, and I'll give the same advice and information to each one of those companies. Some actually get the results, some don't. it's not the information, Jim. It's the implementation. And that's the biggest difference I see. What's coming at the moment to the industry.
It's like what Michael Gerber says. It's really the system. I mean, look at McDonald's. Okay. He brings that example up all the time, Alan. McDonald's. Look who is running a McDonald's restaurant day to day.
Yeah.
Someone who's not highly educated. Some of them, back when I was a kid, they were run by kids. Today, it's not quite the same thing, but they were literally run by teenagers, maybe college kids, right? They were managing it and they were flipping the burgers, but they couldn't mess up because there were systems. And so people who try to not use systems or go around the system fail. And you need to just follow that system, which you're great at. So, question for you. Why do companies who invest in training and coaching start off so well, but often ultimately fail? What happens?
It's taken me another good question, Jim. It's taken me a lot of years to realize this, and I just want to quickly go back to the system. And it was absolutely an honor to spend time with Michael E. Gerber, but the system is only as good as the management that leads it. So here's an example, and I want everyone that's listening to think about, you've given, you've got systems in place, and you've got your staff out there in the field interacting with customers. And I want you to think about this. If your 18-year-old son or daughter was to go to work at McDonald's, they're given great training. I know there'd be great leadership in place, and they're told that, right, you're on the front desk, or you're dealing with the customers through the drive-through. You must offer fries with the order, and you must always look. I'm not really into that. I don't think I will do that. How long are they going to last there? Then they're not going to tolerate that. It's like, this is the friggin' system. You either do it or you don't have a job here. And that's where, coming to your question about trainers, and it all comes back to accountability and leadership. So for years, I was with Service Professionals Australia. We started to bring the likes of Tech Daddy Charlie Greer, Kenny Chapman, great trainers, Mark Madison, Matt Michelle. I've had some of the best trainers on the planet. We've brought them to Australia. We've put on, we've done training within our company. We've done public events. Then I brought Joe Cunningham as well, we've taught technicians how to. Sales is a process, and anyone can be taught a process how to sell, but some sell better than others because of their communication skill. And I believe that anyone that's tuned in and has got one technician sells, he might sell $10,000 a day, but another technician struggles to sell 1,000 a day, or whatever your KPIs are. They've both been given the same training. They've both got the same process. So whenever we brought a trainer, and like I said, I've had some of the best from the US come to Australia. I've spent a ton of money over the years. I don't want to go into the millions that we've invested in training for the industry, not just for my company. The results always increase. I sent everyone to the same course. It could be a 1-day, a 2-day. Charlie did 4-day courses, which were amazing, because he actually would teach you, give you the scripts. You would have to learn the scripts. You'd have to record the script so you knew what to say if the customer said that's too expensive. So nearly every one of my technicians that's gone to the training has come back on fire and has gone out there and absolutely killed it. So, let's say our company was doing 100,000 a month, sales would shoot up to 150 a month, and I'm going, holy shit, this training's great. And then I would project that forward for the next 12 months. But then 2 months down the track, sales are 120, and then 3 months down the track, they're back to 100, or they might even drop below. I'm going, why is this? I mean, the guys are trained. Surely they should be able to keep it up. It basically, it was Joe Cunningham that opened my eyes up to this when I first brought him to Australia, 2013, and he had a process called call by call management. Now, we didn't call it that. We called it the perfect service call. We modified it for drains because that was our focus. That's where we made the most amount of money. And what I realized was the system is good, but it needs to be followed. How do we ensure the techs are actually following it out in the field? And he said, well, we need to put a manager in place that manages the process. And then I realized that it was the accountability for each technician doing the exact process is where we were falling down. And that's where, we've now come up with training for Australia, the industry in Australia. We call it virtual call management because I've taken what I've learned from Joe. I still believe he's one of the best trainers in the industry. He's HVAC, he does train plumbing. And we've taken what he's taught us. I've worked with other great coaches that use a process called virtual ride-alongs, and there's products out there that you can actually manage everything that's said to the customer and that entire process. And we've come up with our own training, it's for plumbers, but more so for drain cleaners, where the money is, right? And it's a process that requires someone to hold the technician accountable for every step. You can't miss a step on this because the system is that tight that it basically forces everyone to follow the process. And that's why results didn't stick, because the accountability wasn't there. It's all changing now with virtual call management.
Yeah. No, thanks for explaining all of that and bringing that to the forefront. Profitability, big thing. We don't want to be unprofitable. If we're in business, we're supposed to make a profit, right, Alan?
Absolutely. And not all companies do.
What are the best ways or the fastest ways to, and we may have touched upon this a bit before, but what truly is the best way to improve profitability the fastest?
Okay. Too many contractors out there don't know their numbers. So they really need to, if you don't know how to read your P&L, you got to have a P&L. If you don't know how to read your P&L, you're going to struggle to improve. And I can tell you, if you were a contractor and I was coaching you, I can just say, Jim, just raise your prices. But there's more to it than that. That is not the solution. Raising prices, when I first start working with a company, the very first thing I want them to do is to generate more revenue so they can at least pay my coaching fees. But you got to know your numbers. So basic accounting numbers is important. You've got to know how to manage by the margin, the gross margin, and then you can control you can price yourself. You might be charging too much. I mean, that's it. Unless I can actually see what someone's charging and refer it back to the P&L and know how I can affect that. You might be overcharging and you might be burning your customers and they're just not using you because so you don't know unless you've got the numbers. So look, the fastest way to improve profitability is to know your numbers, get some coaching in that space. I don't actually coach contractors in that area. I recommend everyone to a lovely lady by the name of Ruth King. She has some great resources on basic business accounting foundations. You got to know your numbers. You got to make sure you're charging right, but you got to be efficient. Efficiencies in the business have more to do with profitability than anything else, as long as you're priced right. So that's, and I'll give an example. You've priced a job. Let's say you've got a billable hourly rate, and everyone uses flat rate. Most companies do anyway. And you've got a billable rate. Let's call that $400 an hour. So the component of a job is, I'm going to allow 10 hours for that job. That's $4,000, right? And I'm going to allow $1,000 worth of parts, and I'm going to mark it up 50% margin. So I'm going to double it. That's the easiest way to get a 50% margin. But what if, and that job might be priced right if it only takes 10 hours to do the job. What if it takes 20 hours, 30 hours, 40 hours, 50 hours, 100 hours? It's possible. I've let it happen in my company. So you've got to manage your efficiencies. You've got to know your numbers. And pricing a job there's a science to it. It's not just we'll throw a number out there that is based on what everyone else is charging and hope that we get it, and we'll try to make money. That's not how it works. So the best way to improve profitability is by knowing your numbers, knowing your efficiencies, accurate pricing, fair pricing. I want you to be pricing. You have to decide how much profit you want to make. If McDonald's stores on average make I think a 22% net profit, why can't a plumber, a contractor, a lot more difficult business to operate? So that's just some basics on how to improve profitability. There's a little bit in it, but it's not completely. It's certainly achievable for anyone that I work with, because I'll get them to understand their numbers, and then let's start digging into your efficiencies a little bit.
There are so many great technicians that own a business. They're not necessarily good business owners. I talk about this with Michael Gerber all the time from the E-Myth. Working on and working in your business. Working in your business certainly is, hey, look, I turn wrenches and I'm really good. I'm a great tradesman. I mean, I'm the best guy in the city. But are you the best business owner? And is that important to you? So if you're self-employed, maybe it's not a big deal, because those, P&L numbers are a lot easier when it's just you, when it's not a real business. But some of these great wrench turners, right? These great technicians want to have a great company. They want to be 3, 5, 10, 15, 20, $50 million in revenue one day. But you've got to be profitable or you will go out of business. And so it is so important to know your numbers. And I guess as that leader of the company, if you're really the best technician in town, but not necessarily the best business owner, you're going to have to step aside and have someone help you, right? Absolutely.
Look, the industry needs coaches, and that's one of the things that I learned early on, because the best businesses on the planet, and in the US, there's companies. I know of a company that I interacted with a few months back that is probably approaching the $2 billion a year mark in revenue. So some big companies there. I will next to guarantee that the CEO is being coached by someone. Okay. Yeah. So it doesn't matter where you're at what size, if you need a coach. And some companies need multiple coaches. Maybe you need someone to help you with your finance. Maybe you need someone to help you with your pricing. I mean, I do that for anyone that knows their numbers. Maybe if you want to grow your drain division, you need someone that's actually built a $20 million plus drain business to help you. So yeah, there's so many good resources out there. And back to where we started, the internet has just opened up and made it easy for everyone. And that's why there's nothing good about COVID. I mean, the fact that they locked us down for nearly 2 years in Australia, there's nothing good that come out of it in that respect, but there's a lot of good that's come out of the technology changes. And I friggin' love it. I love where the industry is heading. I love that I'm part of helping contractors, and you never know, one day I might start up another business, maybe in the US, maybe in Australia, who knows?
Oh, knowing you, probably. Hey, before we wrap it up, what have we missed today?
You got me there, Jim. What have we missed today?
What have we missed? We've talked a lot about how to be profitable, coaching, training, the importance, the changes in the industry. And it's not just this industry, it's all industries, really. So no matter who's watching this, it doesn't matter what industry you're in. If you're not on top of technology, you're going to be left behind. I saw something recently about the real estate market and how that's changing, and how the real estate commissions aren't going to be the same. There's just so much information out there for people, and so many ways for people to do transactions without, humans anymore. And if we haven't missed anything, then this has been awesome. It's been very complete, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. I appreciate you turning the podcast on me, because, look, I'll be honest with you. I don't do as many podcasts as I should, and we've done some together. I've got a very good message for everyone out there, whether they're a small company or a big company. And my message is really through the hardships that I've endured. It's not like we don't grow from good times. We grow when we get hit in the face. Yeah, as Mike Tyson said, it's not until you get punched in the face that you realize, and look, I've got a lot of good stuff that's happened, but I've had a lot of bad stuff, and that's where the lesson is. There's no mistakes in life. There's only lessons. And I want to thank you for interviewing me on my podcast. And I want to thank all of our listeners of Pipeline to Profitability. I hope you've got some massive value from today's podcast.